Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to Bernie Ardia about At Sea with Patrick Dennis. Hello, Bernie.
Hello. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. I understand you were here in Los Angeles last week and working on a fun project. Can you share what you were working on?
I was there and it was nice and cool because I'm in the desert. and I was asked to come to the Academy Museum, the Motion Picture Academy Museum, to restore a wig, an iconic wig from the movie Hairspray that Debbie Harry wore.
The bomb wig?
The bomb wig.
I love that.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes, the iconic exploding wig. And this poor sad thing just
well, it did blow up in the movie.
It did, and there's residue. There is residue from the explosion.
Oh my
goodness. Still, yes, it's still there. And if people go and they look very carefully at the roll above the bangs, they will see the black that was sprayed onto Debbie Harry in the film.
I love that. I love that. Well, that's a unique adventure for you. And then, so another unique adventure is, how did you come to this book?
My goodness. You know, I'm from LA. My husband now of 10 years, but we've been together 30. And I went from LA to New Orleans and we moved to Las Vegas for mid-century modern home.
Okay.
And big mistake. I love the house. But we had wonderful neighbors who were entertainers in Las Vegas. And we met Phil Ford of Mimi Hines and Phil Ford. And we met Anne McCormick. And Anne McCormick is a legendary person. I mean, she was married to Clarence. She was married to Jackie Coogan and a Livermore of Wall Street. But her son, Don Stroud, is an actor and was a Playgirl centerfold.
And he was?
Yeah, yes.
I mean, I might have heard about it. Whoops.
You might still have it in storage, you know. So, but Anne introduced us to the circle of people, but her family was so amazing. Her sister Jan was the manager of Polly Bergen.
Okay.
Her sister Lori, also a singer, and toured with Frank Sinatra.
Oh, wow.
And I have all the reviews of her tour in Australia. She stole the show.
Wow.
It's amazing.
That's not easy to do. Yeah, that's not easy to do with Mr. Sinatra.
Not easy at all. He wanted to fire her. In the Nancy Sinatra books, she's mentioned because Nancy toured with her father on that tour and was convinced she was having an affair with her father, who was still married to her mother, and which did not happen. Yet she accused Anne of this, and it's in her. She writes it in her book. And Nancy, if you're listening, she lives about a half a block down the road from me, so she can come over and get the record straight. But Lori McCormick was her sister, a wonderful, wonderful singer, and had time in LA and Hawaii and this and that. But Lori, when we moved here from Las Vegas to Rancho Mirage, Lori was convinced she was a casting agent.
Okay.
And she loved to cast friends. So she would have been wonderful at like seating people around the table. But she was convinced we had to know Jerry and Rob, her friends from Honolulu. We all share Hawaii. And They live about 2 blocks the other way from me.
Okay.
And when we first moved here 10 years ago, Lori insisted that we call Rob and Jerry, and we did. And we talked to Rob and we talked to Jerry. And Jerry wasn't well at the time, and Rob was kind of caring for him. And it never worked out where they could come over, or we could go over there, or we could go to dinner. And time went by, and Rob passed away, not Jerry.
Oh.
Jerry is still wonderful and alive and well. And daily we email.
Oh.
And so Rob passed away, and Lori, still in her casting mode, sent me a large box full of papers and letters and photographs and all kinds of things to return to Jerry, so we could drive over there and finally meet in person. She was like convinced this was going to happen. So she sent me this box, and I pulled all the things out, and in it was this manuscript called Patrick and I. And it literally, I kid you not, sat in front of me on my desk right here for 6 months. And it was like 1.5 inches thick. And it was,
Wow.
Okay. It intrigued me enough of all the things in this box. And it sat here, and every year we go to LA for my husband Steve's birthday, but also we go to the Beverly Hills Hotel. It's all decorated for Christmas. We celebrate his birthday, and we make out our holiday cards. And we just do that and hog out on room service.
I know where I'll be in December.
So on this trip, this was 3 years, 2000, no, it's longer, longer than that. I threw this manuscript in the bag, and I started reading it one evening. And I was about page 10 or 12 of this, and I called Lori. I said, Lori, this is amazing. I already love this. And what's going to happen to it? Because Rob was gone.
Mm-hmm.
I know he had written many things, none really published. I said, what's going to happen? I didn't have a relationship yet with Cherry to call and say, to ask him, because I hadn't even returned the box yet. I was still looking through this stuff. And she said, well, I told you it's wonderful. As she would. And I said, well, it really is. And I said, I think it's important. And and she said, well, let me make some calls, as a casting agent would.
Yes, as she's wont to do.
Yeah, it's just like natural, right? And so I continued reading. When I got back, she said, well, there are no plans for it. Nothing's going to happen. He didn't have family. And Jerry was in charge of everything, of Rob's. And so she gave me Jerry's number, which I had, his phone number, but she gave me his email. And I emailed him a letter because I just felt that this was important in many ways. And if it were fiction, it would be amazing, but it's not. It's the truth. And the writing style was, and it's so vivid. It just had to be something. So I wrote to him, and I just asked what's going to happen. Not that I really had a plan. I really did not have a plan, but I knew it could not be lost.
Right.
So I wrote, and we connected, and I got the rights to this peace.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, now what? So now what was me stopping everything, but COVID was happening.
Yes.
So COVID was a blessing in this whole thing because it brought time. It brought time where I didn't have to do shows.
Mhm.
There was no theater happening. And I stopped work on a book about Louis Kind, who was Barbra Streisand's stepfather. And I stopped it, and I felt bad about stopping it because I had some really good relationships going with people I was talking to. But this was more important.
Hmm.
This was gay history. It was Patrick Dennis history. It was an amazing story. It was entertaining. And for Lori to be involved in it, I just felt it was a mission.
Mhm.
And I worked on it a year with editing with a neighbor who was wonderful and put all this whole manuscript into a computer. That was the first step. And then, yeah, I mean, that's a while.
It does. It does.
Yeah, a lot of booze.
Yeah. Well, that mirrors the book. I mean,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
had to come with
Vera,
that.
Vera, and Vera Charles would be proud.
Yes.
And so it happened, and the woman Trudy, who introduced me to Ian was through a newspaper article that was in the Desert Sun that I had taped to the wall that I never read for a couple of months. I was like, okay, I put it there. And then when I was done and it was like, okay, this needs to happen now to somebody, I read the article. I thought, okay, well, I am going to email Ian. And I emailed Ian, and he said, send me the first 10 pages or something. And I thought, okay, I'll do that. But Patrick Dennis doesn't come in until page 27. But okay. So then he wanted the first chapter, then he wanted 3 chapters, and then we met. And he said, I want to publish this. Is that gin? Should be.
It will be afterwards, Bernie. Trust me.
And so he got it. He got what this book is, this memoir was about. He got it on all the levels because it is all the levels. And what I love about the whole thing is that everybody, myself included, anybody who reads it, we're all the audience because the author is gone.
Yes. Yep.
So we all have a view about it. We all get something from it's like we all watch a movie together and we all leave and we're in the lobby and we all talk about what we liked.
Yes.
And it's so interesting to find what people saw. And James Magruder, who wrote the introduction, bless him. I mean, he showed me things about this too from his eyes that I wouldn't have seen, yet it's so obvious. And it happens all the time.
I think in a situation like this, I think it's sort of like the article about rattling yarns that you had on the wall. You saved it because something spoke to you, but you didn't need to see it right then. You needed to save it right then. So when it was time to see that, you had that. The books do that with me. I find sometimes I will buy a slew full of books and I might read some right away. Some may sit on a shelf for a year, but it spoke to me. And when I get around to reading it, it's when I needed it.
Yes. Yes.
And that is,
it's like life has no accidents.
No, and this book needed you to come along as well because there's
apparently.
So Robert has passed away, and he was aging. And the book is aging because it's not been out in the world. So it probably needed another set of eyes, another person to put a little spark under. Your friend certainly put a spark under you by sending you the book, and a box.
Yes, she did, and she's gone now, but
Oh,
she was alive to be given a copy of the review copy.
nice, nice. I
And I
love
was so happy for her to receive it, and I was so happy for her to read it. And I was so amazed at her take on just James Magruder's portion, because in her world of show business, she knew so many of those people who were named in that.
you know, and just I'm going to show the cover of the book again. It's important because people of a certain age will instantly know who Patrick Dennis is. But if someone doesn't know who Patrick Dennis is, this is the author of Auntie Mame and several other books. So it's not just one.
Oh, no.
I mean, quite a few. I Wikipedia'd him, but I don't remember how many it
Yeah,
was. But it was quite a few.
he had three bestsellers on the New York Times list at the same time.
And no one else has ever done that, I don't believe.
I don't believe so.
So, I mean, it's important. And what we see in Auntie Mame, I mean, there are very few people, unless they're 12, who haven't seen that movie at some point in their life.
Yes.
But
yes.
Patrick's life really did mirror what he wrote. I mean, Patrick was wild as hell.
That, you know, I had an Auntie Mame in my life, which I write about in it. And I think, I hope many people did.
I think so.
I hope so. It's a gift to have
Very
had
much so.
that. And I love the movies, and I love the play, and all of that is Auntie Mame and her character friends. But she is a survivor.
Mhm.
And she is the Pied Piper, and people follow her. And in this book, this memoir, and I call it a book, I call it, an adventure, but it really is a memoir, and I have to keep reminding myself that this is a true tale. And Patrick was the Pied Piper. Patrick, in many ways, was Auntie Mame.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How can you not see from this short little window of their time that this was not the man who created that woman?
Mm-hmm.
And what a joy she has brought to so many people. But I don't think anything has really been written that shows that. I mean, there are things written about who is the real Auntie Mame, but in reading this, I think you see that this man at the core was this chameleon that could be Auntie Mame, who had everything, who could lose everything, who could be in any circle of society and survive and talk his way in or out of a room. And to me, that was just like magical.
I agree. I mean, and I've met a couple of people in my life along life's journey. I've met a couple of shysters who were so darn good that they could talk the pants off a man or a woman, a child, even if a dog had on a pair of pants.
As long as you're good at it.
Yes, right. And yet people were still drawn to them even after they knew what a perhaps dangerous individual they were, but they were so incredibly charming. I'm not calling Patrick Dennis a dangerous individual, but Patrick Dennis got into a lot of shenanigans in his real life. And it is so fun that here are two people who have a seat at the table through all kinds of crazy adventures.
Yes.
It is. So the byline is My Madcap Mexican Adventure with the author of Auntie Mame. And it is a madcap adventure.
They wanted to keep the title short.
And you didn't do any of that. Well, me and Patrick was short, but we wouldn't have known who Patrick was without
exactly. And I thought so brilliant was Rob's title, Patrick and I.
Yes.
But sadly, because of society today, or education, or what have you. People do not know who Patrick Dennis is. That if they do, they think he is the nephew of Auntie Mame, the character in the movie. But he was a real man, and he was an author. And I hope one of my hopes in all of this is that people will revisit his writing. Yes. Because if you want more of this, it's in his books.
And he's a character for sure. 100%.
And a half.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And oh my God, can you imagine? How I would love to have a couple of cocktails of Patrick Dennis.
You and me both. You and me both. Well, I understand you're going to be in New York in October.
I am.
Where are you going to be?
The Drama Books Shop.
Oh, I love
on
it.
39th. Lin-Manuel saved it. And I am so honored to have been asked to do this. And it's so out of my element. My whole life has been backstage. I have designed hair for shows for over 40 years. And to be in a chair with people looking at me is so out of my element. But the honor and the need to make sure that this book is heard somewhere, because I think I still enjoy it every time I read it. I don't know how many times I've read it, a lot, but it's always entertaining.
And you can find something in it all throughout the book. There's something fun, so it is a story about Patrick Dennis, but it's also a story about Robert and his friend Walter, who go on the adventure with Patrick. And I mean, even their parts, honestly, at the beginning of the book, if someone knows who the Bickersons are, that's definitely Robert and Walter. But it's so cute, because I might have been one of those two more times than one in my life. So totally.
The odd couple. They are the odd couple.
They are. And they get a front row seat.
It's like The Odd Couple meets Maude.
I totally agree. So your trip to New York, that date is October 9th. Is that
October
correct?
9th, yes. And tickets go on sale September 9th or 10th.
I love that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You also told me you're on Instagram at See with Patrick Dennis. One word. Is that right?
One word.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Bernie, this has been so fun. This is such an interesting book, and I'm so very proud of it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure.
I appreciate it. And your love of it. I appreciate that too.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Hang on for me, and I'll be right back.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.